People are all over the place saying, absolutely, I want my kid to go. Absolutely, they shouldn't do it. These kids are all different ages. Teachers have opinions. But just from a psychological perspective, what's your take on when kids should go to kindergarten?
So let's look at this from the lens of development.
Okay.
And there's cognitive development, there's social emotional development, there's physical development, like there's all different aspects of development. But let's look at this from the aspect of development. And I'm going to throw in several different anecdotes here because it does, first of all, there's a wide variety, a wide range of what is even typical in all those aspects, like cognitive development, social emotional development, physical development. There's a wide range of what is typical in those areas, right? And I use typical and atypical. I don't say normal and abnormal because those are value judgments, right? But even a wide range of what's typical. What we're focusing a little bit more on is either social emotional development or cognitive development. And when you have 4-year-olds entering kindergarten or 5-year-olds entering first grade, when you're with other, older, and really at 4 and 5, someone that's 6 months older than you is significantly older than you. And with a range of exposure, what they're exposed to, because that creates, that changes your learning and your development. It makes a big difference. I will never forget when my son was going into first grade, and we did a pre-meeting with the teacher. You go in a couple days before school starts. Do you meet the teacher? You're in the classroom, and she on the classroom on her closet, she had a list of each child's name and their date of birth, and she actually pointed out to us, look, of the whatever number, 20, 25 kids in this classroom, over a third, almost half, are only 5 years old. So not 6 entering first grade. That really affects development. So it actually really impacts the 6-year-olds who are a little bit more developmentally ready to learn. And I'm not saying they're not precocious children. There are some precocious children out there, but I am all for this bill. Yeah, I could go on and on.
Well, yeah, so right now, the bill that's up for discussion would raise the starting age of kindergarten so that you would need to be 5 by September 1st, and you're all for it. Why?
Because they're not yet ready. And I give the example. So I'm a Jersey girl, right? I grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey, and the cutoff for as long as I've ever known has always been October 1st. So if you're not born by October 1st, you are going to school the following year. So that really keeps some amount of typicality in at least age. It doesn't, you're not doing social emotional evaluations and cognitive evaluations, but at least by age, it keeps kids around the same age starting, because it has to do with readiness. We don't have a developmental readiness criteria for children to enter school except by age. And there just are great differences. And so when you mix in significantly younger children with significantly older children, and again, 6 to 8 months in the life of a 4-year-old or 5-year-old is a great difference. It changes the learning environment for everyone involved. And what I also really like about this bill is that it brings in the element and kind of structures it that play is equally as important. Play is so important to your brain development. It creates neural connections. It really is so important. It's not just about, your A's, your B's, your C's, your sight words, your learning, your reading, your numbers, your flashcards, all those things. It is about play. That play and imagination is so important in early development.
Well, and that's part of this bill is they want to even talk about the curriculum that we have, a lot of the teachers are saying that, especially in Connecticut, where we have a lot of leeway when we send our kids to school, that they in kindergarten might have some kids 4 and some kids 6. So that's 2 years of difference in a classroom, and they're doing more in kindergarten. When I went, it was a half day, and I think we colored. Now, they said they're reading
Right.
books, they're doing much more academic stuff. Is that the right thing?
Well, I think, I mean, and I'm not no curriculum expert, nor am I even an educator, but I have tremendous respect for teachers because they do, they have the yeoman's job. They manage our kids for a third of the day, right? A third of the day is sleeping, a third of the day is home, and a third of the day is in school. So, they need the support to, enact aspects of the curriculum. But I do think that, allowing young people opportunities to play, structured play, unstructured play, that's where so much learning takes place. And we really need to allow that. It's not just about crunching the numbers. I mean, I think I talked on one of these segments in the last few weeks about one of the things that's so important is actually reading to your children. So teachers read to children, parents need to read to children. The more you read, the more it expands their vocabulary, the more it creates neural pathways, the more inflection they learn about, feeling words. So, doing things like reading to your children. And again, all kids come from all different kinds of backgrounds. So some families are reading to their kids, some families are not reading as much to their kids. So it just gives them so many opportunities. You can tell I'm like super passionate on this topic.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just go back to break it down for the parents who are like, well, I mean, I want to send my kid. They need to go. I've got to work, and there isn't good preschool and whatever. But just so that's a whole separate issue that we can't solve. We need access to good preschool too. But let's just talk about, you said this is about development. So is there a big change in development between a kid who might be 4 versus entering 5 at kindergarten?
Yeah, I mean, if again, let's just break down basic aspects of development: cognitive development, social emotional development, physical development. Yeah, there are absolutely differences. And again, because 6 to 8 months, a child that's born in January or February and a child that's born in November, are significant differences in their development. That's 7, 8 months. And so what you have to do in educational situations oftentimes is you have to sort of teach to the mean. So now those kids that might be a little bit more developmentally ready have to sort of hold back for those kids that might not yet be developmentally ready. And if we're, again, because we don't use readiness, we don't do testing for readiness, we're only using age. And I do think the argument about this issue, because this kind of legislation has come up before. The argument is always about financial cost because there's cost to either, prolonging going back to work or finding adequate childcare or child daycare settings. And so now if you have a child born September 15th or October 1st, you are having to hold your child back. And I'm saying that loosely because they're being held back based on readiness, age as readiness. Yes, you have to figure out another year of care, but at what cost to long-term educational development?
Mm-hmm. And we see this in my own experience as a parent. I had a borderline kid, a burr baby, right? But September 1st, so just barely burr, and all of the public school educators push that we send. No, he's been in preschool, he's got to go. And look at the ages. They actually, in our district, let you look, and at least in his class, in that particular year, there weren't a lot of kids being held. But you run into that issue where in Connecticut, we also have a lot of the people who have maybe more economic advantage are choosing to hold. And so all these burr babies are just getting, especially if they're boys, they're just holding them anyway. So like every class is different. There's not any uniformity.
Right. And I think, legislation like this really allows parents to kind of stop and think. So it's not just automatic. You're born in this year, you go to school and, you start kindergarten this year, you start first grade in this year. It gives people pause because there are some developmental differences based on gender, biological sex, right? Boys, might have some physical development, but might be a little bit behind in social emotional development. Girls might be a little bit more ahead in social development. So it gives you pause to think, is my child ready? As I said, we don't have readiness criteria. We don't say you have to take a test. Let's see if you're actually cognitively and socially, emotionally ready to enter school. We don't do that. And that's fine, but we do use age. And so this would actually be, I think, putting pause and saying, well, actually, is my child ready? My child might be born August 31st if the law passes and it's September 1st. My child's born August 31st, but honestly, I don't think that they're ready. And I want to allow them another year at home or in a child daycare setting to learn and grow so that they're truly ready, because there is, even in kindergarten, there is some amount of rigor, right? That rigor is, that you have to learn to sustain your attention. You have to learn to sit quietly. You have to learn to listen. And so even those developmental tasks are, that's the rigor that you want in a 5-year-old in kindergarten. It's not just about ABC, sight words, numbers and lessons. And we also have a whole magnet school system that I think really tries to provide different experiences based on curriculums. That's a separate discussion, but I have a lot of feelings about that as well. So, but it's really looking at creating readiness requirements for children entering school so that we have better matching.
And you mentioned we don't test for this, and we don't. But let's say you, as an expert child psychologist, what does readiness look like? What should parents be even looking for to determine if their kid is ready?
And I have, friends and acquaintances. I don't have as many friends and acquaintances with younger age children now, but when my kids were younger and I knew a lot more parents with younger children, people would ask me all the time, and we'd want to really look at what are some, again, the developmental markers. What's your child like socially and emotionally? Because honestly, at age 5, your social emotional development is equally as important as your cognitive development. Because you have to learn, you have to be able to interact, you have to be able to share, you have to be able to communicate, right? So there's a wide variability in one's ability to communicate what you're thinking or what you need or what you want or how you feel. So there's all sorts of things that we could really kind of break down in terms of communication issues. But again, these are the aspects of development. And if we only have one criteria for readiness and it's age, we're going to do a little bit better filtering out those young people that might have communication deficits. And it's not even that it's a pathological communication deficit. They're just a little immature, right? They're just a little on the lower end of that kind of fairly typical development. They're a little bit more immature. And so we're going to give them a little bit more time before we instill some rigor on them. And again, I'm not talking about like flashcards and all this, but school is rigor. It's a longer day. It's, there's more things to do. And that's good, right? We want to stay as a developed nation. We want to stay on top in our academic standards. That's how we create, all the STEM folks, the science, technology, engineering, and math, right? That's how we advance. So yeah. You see, I can just go up on these topics.
Right. I mean, you bring up, there's this race, right, of like, I don't know what we're all racing for, but I gotta go. And it seems to be two things. Like, I want to keep my child home, and there's some access issues with that, versus, they need to go, they need to be reading, there's programs you can buy to start teaching your kids to read when they're 7 months old. I mean, all of that stuff. So, I guess the whole idea of like what actually is development, but you're right, we could digress. But let me just put it a little more focus about this too. You mentioned difference between boys and girls. There's also a lot of research when I've done interviews with those who are not neurotypical, or say they have ADHD, and you may not know that at that age, but they also recommend that also is a delay in cognitive development, and that those kids especially, you might want to give them extra time. What's your take on that?
Okay. I'm just organizing my thoughts here.
Yeah.
Or children, young children, there's, again, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's a pretty wide range in what's typical in terms of attention, concentration. I think communication plays a big role in some of those things, ability to tolerate distress, to manage frustration. Those are, some of the underlying skills that are a part of an attentional disorder. And, when we look at again, there's a pretty wide range of typical, but there's also those individuals that are on the lower range are going to have more difficulty. So if they're on the lower range because they're younger, if they're on the lower range because they have a more inherent, either significant learning disability or attentional disorder. If you talk to preschool, 3 and 4-year-old preschool teachers and kindergarten and first grade teachers, they can tell you, after spending time with a child, that this child is developmentally, a little bit more impulsive. I mean, yes, all children are active and need to be active and don't need to have long attention spans. But teachers with a good amount of experience can see these kids and see that when they have some developmental delays in some of those core areas that are really a part of the rigor of being at school, it hinders them. And if you think about it from a behavioral standpoint, that child that talks out and can't sit in the circle for circle time and gets up and just does things because they're impulsive, right? They start to get some negative feedback. Sit down, Johnny. Sally, you need to, not be playing with that, right? You start to get in this negative feedback loop, and it builds the association that school is a place where I get negative feedback. Now that's an adult conscious thought, but that's what starts to happen for some of these young people that just are not, again, that would be physical readiness, but it also is a cognitive readiness to be in school.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it sort of, it spirals all the way down, because then it's hard once the kids are going. No kid wants to be, quote unquote, held back. We've done that story with you before about the big consideration. Do you repeat 8th grade or do you repeat this? So the time really to make the decision is early on, but I think it's also the time where you know the least as a parent. You're like, I don't know, they say I'm supposed to send my kid. So as we proceed, to be clear, you would support that Connecticut should move to a 9-1 cutoff. And
Absolutely.
what else would you like to see?
Well, yeah, either 9-1 or 10-1, I think would be important. And I do like, and again, this is a very cursory reading of this bill, but I do like talking more about play and the role of play and imagination for young children, because that is so critical to their development. It's not just about, flashcards and numbers and sight words and all those things, but using more play, really supporting teachers. Teachers are unbelievably hardworking, and teachers are the ones, they don't, I can come to work and do my work and then leave my work. Sometimes I have a little work after, but teachers all have work, right? They all take home work with them. They all have other things that they need to do, whether they're elementary, middle, or high school teachers. So this bill is also talking about providing fair compensation to teachers for all the work that they have to do. So I'm, again, even in my cursory reading, I really think this is a step towards creating a better playing field for our young children so that they can have more success.
So let's go to the topic then you go earlier about when to send them to preschool, because that's the big topic, right? They're saying, well, kids, what about my kid who now I'm going to have to keep paying for preschool? Or, I mean, I guess we need to move. There's some efforts to move toward universal preschool, but it's not there right now. Magnet schools, you're still in a lottery. A, is preschool really important? And B, what should that look like for your kid?
I do think preschool really is important. I do think some amount of exposure is important. And again, we're not talking about a high degree of rigor. We're talking about exposure. So it's exposure to words, it's exposure to learning, it's exposure to other children. As a psychologist, I'm always saying that social emotional development is equally as important as your academic development and your cognitive development, because you can be brilliant, but if you can't get along with the person working next to you, what good does it do? Or, the person that you're in school with. So I'm obviously a believer that social emotional development is equally as important. So there is some amount of exposure that happens in quality childcare settings. Whether you're there full day because your parent has to work, or partial day because your parent just wants to increase your exposure. And obviously there need to be some work done, but other states have done this. So, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. As I said, I know, in Bergen County, New Jersey, they've had an October 1st cutoff forever, for greater than 50 years. So other places are doing these things. We just need to, look to some of our neighbors, but we do need to provide more support to preschool settings. Preschool settings were devastated during COVID. That's a whole separate topic, because of, once the kids aren't there, then their parents are home, they're not paying. So it really affected the quality and the amount of space in preschool settings. But our preschool settings really are important to promote readiness as well.
So if you're a parent listening and going, gosh, I'm still confused, the law hasn't passed yet, but what do I do? Part of it is we have to make these decisions this summer, and so 3 months, you said, can be a long time in development. It sounds like you're very clear. You think it's better to be 5 years old before to go to kindergarten, even with or without this law passing by the fall. But what should you be doing as a parent right now if you're going, okay, what do I do? Do I sign up for preschool again, or do I enroll them and then, I'll see how they're doing in August? Is there somebody should I go what questions should I be asking your teacher? Like, how can you make this a thoughtful process over the next couple of months before fall starts?
Well, we can't send all of, those kids to, child psychologists
Right.
We can't do that. I mean, if a parent has concerns about their cognitive, social, emotional development, communication, who's the first line person for kids? It's talk to your pediatrician or your pediatric clinic. I mean, they might not say what I'm saying, which is absolutely hold them back. But when there are enough concerns about development in those key areas, I think as a parent, it gives you pause to say, maybe I should wait, right? Because as you mentioned, it's much easier to allow your child to have kind of open development or see where their developmental trajectory takes them, as opposed to holding them back in 2nd grade or 5th grade, or, purposely in 8th grade, and that oftentimes in those situations, in those 8th grade situations, then you're sending them to a different high school, because that's really sort of taking them off track with their peers. And most districts have really gone away from those kind of holdbacks, because it does really affect one's feeling of self-worth and can really have some negative impact. So they're doing it less and less. They're just sort of pushing them forward and trying to get them some supplementary support. And even that's, there's, not enough supplementary support out there.
Yeah. So ask the questions, and you're right, we can't all, that's why we have a podcast with Dr. Laura Saunders, so that you can ask these questions yourself, and make the determination. I will say, I have a husband who went to school early, right? He's December 18th. And he will say to this day that he wishes his parents held him back, that he, couldn't drive to his junior prom, he was always smaller, all these things. I don't see, when we're later on in life, it never seems that people ever regret being held. They regret maybe going early, but I don't usually hear the reverse.
Right, and hindsight's always 20/20. And again, parents do the best job that they can. And there's a lot of stress and pressure on them in terms of finances and preschool and child daycare and all those things. But if your child's not ready, socially, emotionally, cognitively, communication wise, and you sort of they're born in this year, right? This is 2023. So if you're born in 2018, math is not my strong point, right? You're just going to school. and you're sort of forcing, and even as parents, right? Parents that spend time with other children know that their child might be a little bit more immature, right? Parents know these things. Even if you have an only child and you're living in a cave and you don't know any other children, that might be a situation where you don't see that your child might be a little bit different or a little bit atypical in their communication or in their social emotional skills. But any parents that spend time with, nieces and nephews or cousins or other kids in their neighborhood, when your child's a little bit off in some of these developmental areas. And obviously you need someone to talk to. I get that, but in this situation, often the pediatrician's the front line. The pediatrician might not say, hold your child back or definitely make your child go, but that might be a person to at least have this discussion with. The schools cannot give you an opinion on that, so they're not always helpful, because they would just have to follow the law and say your child's eligible for school this year, so you can enroll them in school. But I am a proponent in allowing your child to be at the best level of readiness possible.
Erring on the side of caution. Another year, giving them, I mean, I know that for those borderline kids, it can be a big decision for parents, but you're thinking giving them a little bit more time could be more beneficial than, it's not going to hurt them to have more time, I guess, if you're on the fence.
I don't think it'll hurt them.
Not going to hurt them. So these are definitely discussions that the state is having, and I guess someone else is going to have to figure out the whole money aspect of it. But as we close here in our last minute, to sum it up, Dr. Laura Saunders would say, definitely you should be 5 by kindergarten, and you would support, in a strong way, having that date changed.
Yeah, any legislation that creates a little bit more of a readiness criteria, because right now we have 0 readiness criteria except the year that you're born.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Laura Saunders, we appreciate you being with us. I know parents it's a big decision. I remember being there, and I still wonder sometimes, but we are what we are. Once they get older, then they decide what they want to do. Right. So again, if you're at this situation, it's a good time to start in the beginning. If you're later on, I guess you'll have to talk about gap years or other things in development. But we appreciate you being with us. You can follow me on social media at Kara Sundlin for more information. Have a great day and be well.